Okay, fourth period. If I have something like I to the 31st power, let's break that down and figure out how would I figure that out. Let's look at a smaller example first. This is, let's do I to the 9th. The reason I wanted to show you a smaller one is because I want to go ahead and show what that means. That means I times 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 I. 9 i's. Well, we know that every time you have 2 i's, that's I squared. I times I is I squared. And that makes -1. So this is -1, and this is -1, and this is -1, and this is -1. So I've got -1 times -1 times -1 times -1 times I. I just bring that down because it's not, doesn't have anything to partner with. Furthermore, what is -1 times -1? -1 times -1 is just 1. So this is just 1 times 1 times I. So my answer is going to be I. And that's what I put for my answer. Now let's look at how we got these ones. We got a -1 by putting 2 i's together, multiplying. I times I squared is -1. I times, well, I squared twice, basically I to the 4th gave me 1. Every time I have 4 i's multiplied together, that gives me a 1. I don't have to multiply by 1. If something's multiplied by 1, it just stays the same. So for instance, you could think of this as I to the 4th times I to the 4th times I to the 1st, which is just I to the 1st, or I. In other words, 9 can be broken into 4 plus 4 plus 1. So every time I can break it into 4 i's, that's another just plain 1. So up here, 31, well, that's 4, 4, 4. In other words, I'm trying to get to 31. So this is 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24, 28, and then there's not another 4, so 29, 30, 31. You don't have to write it all out like this every time. I'm just showing you this, how it works for right now. So every I to the 4th is a 1. So this is 1, 1, 1. All these are just times 1. You don't have to do times 1. So I to the 31st, it turns out, is the same as I to the 3rd. And we can figure that out. I to the 3rd is I times I times I. These two make I squared, which is -1. And so my answer is -I. We can use this to break down any power of I the following way. Let's look at sort of a chart here. I is just I. All right, I squared. What's I squared? I squared is I times I, or -1. I to the 3rd, we just pointed out, that's 3 i's. This one is -1. These two make -1, and then there's an I. So this is -1I. And we've already pointed out that I to the 4th always turns out to be 1. Let me make this a 1 so it's very clear. All right. If you know these 4 or can figure out these 4, you can figure out any power of I. Because basically, you take the remainder when your exponent is divided by 4. Okay, let's see, 19 divided by 4. Well, the biggest number that 4 goes into that's part of 19 would be, let's see, 16. In other words, I have a remainder of 3. 4 times 4 equals 16. It gives me a remainder of 3. So this is going to be the same as I to the 3rd, which we already know is -I. In other words, when I take 19 and divide by 16, I'm going to have a remainder of 3. Okay, another way of looking at that is 19 is 4 plus 4 plus 4, this is 12, plus 4, which is 16, plus 3. So if I have I to the 62nd, I just have to know what is the biggest multiple of 4 close to 62. And since 4 goes into 20, then 60, it must go into 60. So that's the same thing as I to the 60, which is divisible by 4 times I squared. Well, if this is divisible by 4, this all becomes a 1. So 1 times I squared, and we know that I squared is always negative 1, gives me negative 1. So I to the 62, 62nd power, gives me negative 1.